Hi everyone.
What up?
You all know me as Sappho,
Well, yeah, I know your name now because a bunch of people made responses to you to this video a few months ago. Prior to that, I had never heard of you.
and I wanted to make a video about coming out.
Mean like coming out as lesbian or something? Don't get me wrong, I'm pretty sure that's not an easy thing to do, but this ended up being a huge deal. But I don't think it would have been a big deal if you were just coming out as LGBT. It has to be something else.
Coming out with anything can be very difficult, especially if it's something that society currently views with disgust or is a bit dangerous to even come out with the way that things are right now.
Okay, I think we can scratch lesbian off the table. You make it sound like you're coming out as a Nazi. I could see people making that big of a deal over that. Mind you, no one really knew who you were before this video, so why would they care if you were a Nazi? Then again, people seem to think white supremacy is becoming some sort of epidemic, even though it isn't. In reality, Nazis shouldn't be taken seriously. So if you are coming out as a Nazi, I'm probably just going to make fun of you.
And it's a lot like when homosexuals were coming out in the 1960s.
Weirdly enough, this could still apply to coming out as a Nazi in 2021. You risk being ostracized by society, disowned by your family and friends, fired from your job, and even having physical violence done against you. The difference is that being a Nazi would be your choice, whereas being gay is something you're born with. Since you're comparing this with a confession to a gay person coming out in the 60s, I really hope you're not coming out with something horrible, because if you are, it's insulting to all the gay people who risked their lives coming out in the 60s.
And I know that 99% of my viewers, my community, you don't have anything wrong with homosexuals or gay people.
People are homosexuals. That's like saying you don't have anything against canines or dogs. It's redundant. But anyhow, I'll take you at your word that most of your audience has no problem with homosexuals. What does this have to do with whatever you're coming out with?
You support them, you support LGBT, nothing against them.
I'll have to take you at your word that your audience weren't prejudiced against LGBT people. I mean, from what I understand, most of your audience were furries, and there are a lot of things you can call furries, but prejudice against LGBT people is not one of them. Furries in general tend to be very accepting people. If I had to criticize them on anything, I'd say that some furries are too accepting, tolerant, and open minded.
But I guarantee that many of you, even if you can't imagine it now, if you were growing up in the 1960s and were being fed all of the news and social propaganda about how gay people should stay in the closet, how it's unnatural and against nature, and all sorts of crazy shit like that, a lot of you would probably be anti gay, anti LGBT. And that's just how it is.
Not necessarily. You see, the reason for this attitude in the 60s was ignorance with regards to the nature of homosexuality. For one thing, religion was a lot more common back in those days, and society in general was more conservative and traditional. In fact, the whole point of the hippie movement in 1969 was to rebel against religion, traditionalism, authoritarianism, and conservatism. It questioned the patriarchy, the absolute legitimacy of the government, the infallibility of religious teachings, and even the gender binary to a certain degree. But I was raised by a patriarchal, Christian fundamentalist, right wing, pro war stepfather who constantly insulted my masculinity and insulted me by saying that I looked gay because I was a goth kid. I was taught that being gay was a choice, but by the time I hit puberty, I realized that I couldn't stop myself from being attracted to females even if I wanted to, and there was no way I could force myself to be attracted to males even if you paid me to. I also made friends with a couple people who were gay, and I realized that they were just regular people, but instead of being attracted to the opposite sex, they were attracted to the same sex. If I couldn't control to whom I was attracted, how could these people? Not long after, I moved out of my stepfather's custody, where I was free to explore my own beliefs. And I'm sure a lot of people came to the same conclusions, even in the 60s. They were probably just too scared to say it out loud.
And I respect you all, and frankly, this sort of thing would have leaked out eventually, especially with how cancel culture is these days and other furry drama.
Not bravely being honest for the sake of transparency. You just don't want to give anyone else the satisfaction of embarrassing you. So, whatever this secret of yours is, you're going to admit it before anyone else gets a chance to expose you so you feel like you're in control of the narrative. It's almost like if you heard your partner was going to break up with you, so you broke up with them first, or you found out you were going to be fired, so you quit before your boss had a chance to fire you. Are you a Nazi after all? Was I right?
There would be people out there that, they want to have a gotcha moment. They want to build their fame and popularity and, expose people. And I'm just not going to give the opportunity for a Sappho exposed kind of video.
Well, after you put this video out, there were all sorts of Sappho exposed videos made. But again, I forgot about this whole ordeal until just now. So I finally get to see what all the fuss is about. I'm starting to get a really bad feeling about it, to be honest.
And I would rather suck the air out of the sails of the rantsonas, and instead of letting this sort of thing build, just be open and honest about myself and my beliefs.
The more you talk about it without saying what the actual secret is, the more it sounds like you're a Nazi. And now it seems like you're trying to put it off as long as you possibly can.
And I want to clear the air and say that, for the record, I am a zoophile.
Wait, what the fuck did you just say? Did I hear that right?
I am a zoophile.
Yeah, that's what I thought you said. Well, now I can see why everyone made such a big deal about this. You had the fucking audacity to compare yourself to a gay person coming out in the 60s? But maybe you haven't actually raped any animals. Maybe it's just an attraction. You haven't acted on it yet. I don't want to jump to conclusions.
I do not have a thing for humans. I am more attracted to dogs like German Shepherds.
So this isn't the same thing as being gay. Homosexuality and bisexuality can be found in many species of mammals, so we know it's natural. Zoophilia, on the other hand, is a paraphilic disorder only found in human beings. You have a mental disorder causing these feelings. It's not the same thing as having a sexual orientation. Because if you act on your attraction, which you will inevitably do if you don't get help, you will be committing an act of rape. Because dogs can't consent to humans. Your only saving grace at this point is the fact that you were honest about it and the possibility that you haven't raped any animals yet.
If you are willing to stay and listen to my view and explanation, that is the point of this video. It is to show that there are ethical guidelines. It's not so black and white like many furries think that it is, and a full explanation as to the way that I think and the way that others think and why.
If your ethical guidelines are anything other than only look, don't touch, then they aren't ethical guidelines. If your ethics allow you to have sexual relations with dogs, then what you call an ethical code is one that allows rape. You may not see it this way, but that's exactly what it is. Dogs can't consent to sex any more than children can, and this is not at all.
Zoophilia is often very misunderstood, especially because of certain very terrible people and what you may have seen in the news. And someone that I will not mention, if you remember that situation with the Zoosadism Leaks a few years back. Unfortunately, when people think of zoophiles, especially furries, that's the person that comes to mind. That is the situation that comes to mind.
Talking about Kiro the wolf, who not only had sex with Roadkill, but sexually abused his family dog to the point of giving the dog kidney failure. Kiro was part of a group of furries who did unspeakable things to animals, and some of the people he associated with were even actively involved in pedophilia. There will be links in the description if you want to know more info on that, but I warn you, it's very upsetting. Look, the details that separate you from Kiro are arbitrary. At the end of the day, animal rape is animal rape. If the animal rape you engage in isn't as violent as the animal rape they engaged in, you still both engaged in animal rape.
And I'm talking about horrible abuses. And I'm not accusing a certain individual of anything here, but those leaks showed some truly horrendous people.
Yes, those leaks included people like Snake Thing, Wolf, and Timwin, some of the most despicable people in the history of the internet. You may not be as bad as some of these people, but if you're an active zoophile, you still advocate for the rape of animals under the flimsy excuse that animals can consent, which they can't. Your argument boils down to, these guys were worse though, which doesn't magically make you innocent of any wrongdoing.
And to be 100% clear, I am not like that. Most of the zoo community is also not like that and utterly despises it.
So you don't torture animals, you just rape them. Again, your argument is that because there's people who are worse than you, we should treat you as though you were not guilty. That's not how this works, and I feel like a broken record when I have to keep repeating this.
People who force animals into situations they don't want, physically and through other means, are completely deplorable and seen as rapists. Playing with an animal that is not sexually mature is like the equivalent of pedophilia, and it's treated as such. I do not support those people, and they do not deserve the same title.
So you don't force animals into sex acts, you just manipulate them. And you don't do it with puppies, you wait until the animal is sexually mature. Well, guess what? It's still like pedophilia because even an adult animal has the understanding of a child. You are taking advantage of their lack of understanding and manipulating them into sexual situations. You are raping them, whether you intended to or not. Just because you're not as bad as some other zoophiles doesn't mean what you're doing is okay. And the fact that I have to explain this to you tells me you're either completely delusional or you're lying to see who's stupid enough to fall for your bullshit.
They're fetishists and bestialists. I do not want them to be the face of the community, and they should not be the face of the community. It's like literal Nazis considering themselves furries in the fandom.
How is this the same in any way? Furries are people who like anthropomorphic animals. If a Nazi likes anthropomorphic animals, then what the hell do you call them? And how is being a Nazi similar to advocating for the rape of animals?
You don't want them. We don't want them. We don't want that image to be what people think about. Ethical zoos are not like that. Zoophiles are among the most caring and loving people towards animals and their mates.
You're delusional. If you think what you're doing is loving and caring, you're delusional. The feelings you have for your mates, quote unquote, aren't mutual. You have manipulated them into sexual situations and convinced yourself it's the same as consent between two adults. It's not. If you're willing to admit you're wrong and get help, I'd be open to accepting an apology. But as long as you use these excuses, I fail to see how you're any better than your run-of-the-mill animal rapist. You need help, like you need serious psychiatric help. And until you get that help, you shouldn't be anywhere close to an animal. And other than that, I don't have anything more to say.